I will talk about how things have changed and why things have changed and why debt has spiraled, especially consumer debt. But he, in generally, he, as someone mentioned, he's really interested in like the kind of mindset and the kind of morality, the kind of mindset this imparts to all of us, and the kind of morality it imparts, how it affects us individually, how it affects society. You know, I could go into like a psychoanalysis session right now talking about how debt eats away at my psyche when I worry about my credit card bills and my mortgage. So this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm sorry. But so I'm going to start. I want to have a little bit of a discussion. I'm going to do a little breakout now with y'all, and this is going to be. I'm going to make it on a theme. I'm going to make it very personal. All right, it's going to get personal. Everybody, get ready. But I wanted to tie into the themes of precarity that he has in mind. So I'm putting in the chat here. Just for a few minutes, I'm going to put you in groups where I want you to talk about your own financial hopes for your career, what you imagine, what you hope for. What does your ideal career life setup look like 20 years from now? And what are your major financial fears or concerns? So it's gonna be a little bit of a bitch session. And I'm hoping you might really start to like get hot and heavy talking about your college degree. How has this set you up? And for what? And I won't let it get too negative, I promise. All right. I'm gonna put the questions in the chat, send them to you. Let's meet back in 10 minutes.
Uh, but yeah, yeah, that's currently the plan. So just want to get out of this debt free, basically, no matter how shitty the economy is, just come out debt free at the end and go on and get a master's at Corso, cost twice as much. Um, but yeah, I guess I'll be taking the easier route then. Um,
Yeah, it's hard to make plans. Well, I guess personally, it's hard to make plans like after debt because you're so preoccupied with your current debt. It's hard to make
Mhm.
plans for afterward. You don't know when you're going to be able to pay it off. You don't know how much like freedom you're going to have with your
It doesn't even make sense to like try to predict anything at this point because we don't even know what's going to happen with like even with the fall. So we can plan stuff, but it seems kind of senseless to try to predict everything.
I agree. I feel like also in order to predict stuff with confidence, at least, you have to know a lot.
You guys adjourned?
We did.
Somewhat.
We
Everyone
also,
wants to go to the desert and have a stable job.
yeah. We also didn't realize you could leave the breakout room early if you wanted to.
Me either. I thought I had to close them. All right, well, I'm going to give everybody another minute and then I'll close them.
Oh shit, my mic's-
Are we all back? I think so. So I did pop into a couple of rooms and I apologize. I guess I might have asked some pretty sensitive questions. But just trying to connect with the spirit of your reading. What how y'all feeling? What is the career mood in the room? Who wants to go first? I see.
I mean, I want to pursue the career that I'm studying here.
And do you feel optimistic, I guess is the point, like about how it's looking and how the security and the sensation will be?
It depends. Like, I don't feel super optimistic right now just because I'm getting denied at a lot of internships, and COVID kind of destroyed previous opportunities I had to get that experience. And it's kind of a big deal to not have like a full legitimate internship in your career in product design your junior year summer. And so it doesn't feel like employers are taking that into consideration. Either that or my portfolio is just garbage or something, I don't know. And so that doesn't feel very hopeful, but I'm looking at pursuing grad school to kind of offset the effects of COVID. And if I get into none of it, neither grad school nor an internship or a starting job, then I'll feel pretty hopeless at that point. Pretty bad. I think once I get a job, I'll feel fine about the whole career though.
All right. Anybody else?
It's kind of funny that it took me going to school for this to realize that I don't want to make it like my money maker. Like
Can't
I'm
tell you how
super
many-
glad.
I've had a lot of students say that, Jessica, so don't worry.
Yeah, I just feel like making your passion the way that you make money can really ruin the passion. So like I'm definitely gonna keep doing this forever. Like it's not like after I leave school, I'm gonna get a job in something totally random and not do photography ever. But I just don't wanna have like a legit career that's focused on like making photos or something like that. Like I don't want to feel like my art is what's making me money. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think my career hope at this point is that Andrew Yang gets made president of everything and gives me money.
Okay. Oh gosh.
That's all I got right now.
That's like a lottery ticket. You're getting on a lottery ticket. My first question was, what are your financial hopes for your career? I wasn't really sure how to put it. I'm also not totally sure what I'm asking. I guess, like, do you have a vision? There was an email. I got an email from the college last week. I assume you guys did too, about financial planning, right? All these seminars. Because now you got to be prudent financial planners, you know? I mean, where do you see yourself in 20 years? Anybody looking that far ahead? It's okay if you're not. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but just in case you are, what do you see? Beach house? Dream with me. Motorcycle? No? Okay. I know
I mean,
that.
who even knows what the world is going to look like in 2041? You know, I kind of
Probably
don't.
a fiery hellscape.
Who knows? Why would I plan that far ahead? It's like kind of seems kind of foolish.
Thank you to Ariana, who's playing along. Tiger rug. I love it. You know, Jesse, I'm going to pierce your bubble. Okay. I'm coming after you right now. My favorite movie of all time, Blade Runner. Guys seen Blade Runner?
I keep meaning to, but I don't.
Oh, do yourself.
I've seen both Blade Runners.
What's the opening scene? What year is it? 2019. It's 2019. It was written in 1983. Go back and look at it now. What they thought 2019 would look like, they were way off. So my message to you, Jesse, is it's probably going to look, 2041 will probably look a lot like 2021. There'll be different cars out there, and it'll probably be warmer. But there will be no offshore colonies like in Blade Runner.
No, but Florida might be underwater by then.
Florida, I mean,
It definitely will.
I don't know. I washed my hands of Florida. I'm done. I don't know what to say for them. But anyway,
It's better off that way.
I'm sensing, are you guys generally, are you full of trepidation or not so much? You know what I mean? Like, many of you are seniors here. You're about to go out into this work world.
I mean, I can start planning once I have a job and I have a stable salary of some kind. Like, I don't even have that yet. So what am I supposed to plan around?
Okay. Air. I'm glad you put that in the chat, Air.
That was supposed to be to Louis.
It's much better when you share with everybody. Don't keep it to yourself. Daniel wants to go to Norway. Why, Daniel?
The free master's education and looks like a pretty cool place to live for a while.
Healthcare taken care of.
Good design there.
Good design, sure.
About your dream of being a constructivist designer.
I wasn't even thinking about the design. I've been to Norway once. Very expensive, but everything is taken care of. Free healthcare and, of course, free college and free, or highly subsidized education, excellent schools for your children. Now that's kind of getting at the issues that I wanted to talk about, which is like, do you imagine a future of security? You know, because that's what they've done in the Scandinavian countries. You know, you have when we start to talk about debt, we start to talk about obligations hanging over your head, you know. In the Scandinavian model, your taxes are very high, upwards of 60%, but you get a lot for them. In the United States, our taxes are considerably lower, but then you are of course, much more responsible for yourself, right? I'm reading Rachel becoming a film director. Oh, farm life. That sounds nice. I just got an email for one of my favorite Micah students of all times. He runs a farm now, an organic farm. So I'll hook you up with that guy. He can get you a job, maybe. My chickens, thank you, Daphne. They're great. I was going to chime in on the Google ad discussion, though. I have a predator. So I've been shopping for traps, and Google knows. So like I go to a various website and Google's like, what about this trap? I'm like, oh, that is a good trap. Shit. Thanks, Google. Maybe I'll look into that trap. They don't have names. Y'all look the same, Teresa, but thank you. I can't tell them apart. My kids gave them names. My kids called them Pokemon creatures or names, but they all look the same, so we gave up. Okay. Back to serious business. Debt. I got debt. You have debt. I popped in on Branton's conversation. He was going over his debt.
Well, actually, a lot of my debt has been lifted.
You're the ROTC guy.
Wait, what?
You're the ROTC guy, right? You're ROTC.
Yeah. But I mean, I already have all 4 years of MICA paid off. I was just worried about the future with going to with pursuing a master's degree.
Oh yeah.
So you know, like all I have to do is just serve a minimum of 3 years in the Army. And I'll come out with my entire master's degree tuition, including room and board, supplies, everything, just all paid for. So it's pretty much lifted a lot of burdens from me. So
your master's degree will be paid for?
Yep.
There are more MICA people now considering the Army. Interesting. Okay.
Stuff.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, to live in this industrial society today, in this democracy, is to live with debt. That is a reality everywhere you turn. Let me share some stuff with everybody here. This is something I looked up. A study on American household credit debt. I'll put this in the chat in case you're interested. Total owed by an average U.S. household, $145,000 in debt. That has grown by 3% in the last year. That means people are borrowing money, which is not surprising, given that we've been in a crisis. Credit card debt. This is what I really wanted you to see. The average household has $7,000 of credit card debt. Mortgages, $190. Auto loans, $28. Student loans, $57, $56.5. Anything surprising about these? Anybody surprised by these figures? Anybody have any comments? Anything they want to point out?
Well, my family has 5 kids, so all these numbers are way higher.
Of course. I have 4. My numbers are higher too.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
I find it interesting that mortgages are so much higher than auto loans and student loans. I feel like auto loans would probably be more common than mortgages, even if they are significantly lower. I feel like just the abundance of them would bring them at least closer to mortgages. And we hear so much about student loans these days that I would have assumed that they were much closer to mortgages.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Used cars are a pretty common purchase, so that makes sense actually.
That might cut down on the auto loans.
Yeah.
I can't see the chat right now, so whatever you see, tell me.
Yeah, Carfax.
Dang, I forgot to look this up, but student loans, one thing I was trying to find was a trajectory of debt over the past few decades. The student loan debt has really skyrocketed in the last 20 years. Credit cards, that's a little bit of a lower trajectory, but it's definitely, been accelerating as well. I'm not sure if there's anything else here that I want to share with you. So I'm just gonna put this in the chat for everybody. So, what kind of things are people using credit cards for?
Buying everything, pretty much. I don't think I have carried cash in a really long time, especially going around Baltimore and things.
And in COVID, I mean, a lot of stores
Yeah.
don't accept cash suddenly. Yeah, I mean, people tend to use credit cards to buy everything, Gosh, some people have even bought homes on credit cards if it was in the credit limit, cars, you can buy them on a credit card, and people do. And here's a quote on page 19 at the bottom from Lazzaratto. He says, consumption, the middle of that middle paragraph, consumption, which makes up the largest share of GDP in developed countries, is another major source of creditor revenue. Consumption is creditor revenue. Our consumption is revenue for those who provide credit, like the credit cards. Make sense? Sure. Like American Express, they have great revenue when we use the card. In the US, the largest family purchases are made on credit. But consumption runs on debt, even for everyday purchases, quite often paid for with a credit card. In the US and the UK, the level of household debt relative to disposable income is 120% and 140%. So look at those figures. The level of household debt relative to in disposable income is 124 to 140%, which means that people routinely have more debt than they have cash to spend, right? For a long time in the United States, we used to talk about the savings rate. And up until 10 years ago, when there was the mortgage crisis in 2008, there was a major correction. People were not saving money. And so things improved in America and the savings rate rose. The savings rate in 2008 rose, and it rose to 0. You know what that means? It's not good when you're rising to 0. You get it?
Before, people were spending more than they were making.
They were not saving. They just weren't saving. And I remember at the time, we were compared to China. And for example, in China, the savings rate is somewhere in the order of like 5 to 10%. Of course, an interesting dynamic has happened over the last 10 years. The Chinese economy has focused on manufacturing, and they're trying to transition to a consumption economy like us, which is strange, right? They want people to stop saving money, and they want people to start spending, right? Like us Americans, they want to be like, we're the champs of spending. They want to be like us, or the government does. I have to think about why they want that to happen. I guess they want the cash to be circulating in the economy. But we are an expert consumer economy. And he, what he's really interested, Lazzaratto is really interested in politics, not only politics, but morality. And he tells us early on here, he says that credit is one of the most effective instruments of exploitation. Credit is one of the most effective instruments of exploitation. How so? How is credit a tool of exploitation, Sean?
Because if you give someone credit, then they got debt, and now they're stuck working 9 to 5 every day for 20 years to pay it off in a job they hate.
Yeah, you have power over someone, quite literally, right? And you can, but what about the exploitation part?
I mean, capitalism. Any job is exploitative in capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is more than just a job, right? This is holding someone in check. And you kind of have them at your mercy in a way. The guilt, Teresa mentions. Oh, Teresa, this is where your author gets very excited. I'm a little excited, but he's more excited. Guilt in German is Schuld. And Schuld in German equals debt. So in German, guilt and debt are the same thing. And it's funny, like sometimes if I am in trouble with my credit card company, I haven't paid my balance, and they start calling me, I'm like, don't judge me. How dare you judge me? I have kids. I'm responsible. I feel judged. I don't know why. You know, I shouldn't, but maybe they are, those bastards. Maybe they're judging me. He says on page 24 that finance is a power relation. Finance is a power relation. This is definitely something that Mazzucato would agree with. Finance is a power relation. That's a quote, by the way. And, you know, one of the topics that he takes up in this book that we really haven't seen is something called sovereign debt. And sovereign debt is really about how government is under the thumb of finance. He tells a story here early on about, you know, how governments would pay their bills if they didn't have revenue. Okay. How governments would pay their bills if they didn't have the cash. This is one of the oldest stories of human civilization. Does anybody know? My father always said the government will abuse the currency. The government will abuse the currency. Do you guys know what governments in the past used to do if they didn't have enough cash, how they would get it? I mean, and I know y'all are probably thinking like conquest, but short of conquest. Oh yes, go ahead, Sean.
Aha, printer go burr.
What?
Money printer go burr.
Print money in the days of coins.
Mine gold.
I mean, okay, you print dollars. The US government has a very handy way out of any bills. Like, oh, you need money? Oh, no problem. Let me go talk to the Federal Reserve. We got a press right here. In the digital age, I can't even begin to wrap my head around it. Now you just need numbers to appear on a balance sheet. Like, boink, you got it. In the pre-modern times, money was coins. How did the government abuse that currency? Anybody know? The coins were made of gold.
Oh, wait. Did they like dilute the gold?
You are very close.
Did they make the coins smaller?
Yes. They would chip away at the coins. And the coins, like in the Roman Empire, the coins would get smaller and smaller and smaller for the same denomination. And they would just take that gold and make more. They were effectively creating inflation, right? So the old way that governments used to get around debt was inflation. They would just make their own currency, right? And Lazzaratto says this game ended in 1980 with a guy by the name of Paul Volcker. 1979, he was the head of the Federal Reserve. And because we had inflation, I think we did touch on this, because we had inflation in this country that was run away, he said, all right, I'm going to stop this. He put interest rates at 20%. That's extremely high. This is like the base interest rate that the Fed, like, I think I talked about this briefly, but the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the United States, which prints your money, right? Like on your dollar, it says Federal Reserve. On your dollar, on your loan dollar, on the only dollar you have, there's a Federal Reserve there. Okay. And the Federal Reserve is also known. So the Federal Reserve is known as central bank. It is charged with printing money, but also it is called the lender of last resort. I think we did touch on this. Anybody know what that means? The lender of last resort.
They're like the fallback option. They are the last ones to pay out loans and money.
One of the biggest, when you have an economic crisis, you have what's called a run on the bank, right? People run to the banks to get their money out. The problem is a bank never has your money. It is in the business of lending. So they always have less money in deposits than in loans.
Wait, isn't your money insured by the federal government though?
That's exactly the point. That's what it means to be the lender of last resort.
Gotcha.
So the bank never has your money, and the bank will turn around to the government and say, you got to lend me money because they're coming for it. And the government said, absolutely. And they lend money on a continual basis to the banks at a very low interest rate, which they call the discount rate. And that is the benchmark for all subsequent interest rates throughout the economy. I don't know what the benchmark is today. I didn't look. But if it is, say, 2%, then the banks will set their mortgages at 3% and the credit cards will set it at 7%. If the discount rate goes up to like 3%, then the mortgages are going to go up to 6% and the credit cards will go up to 10%. And so it goes. Okay. Effectively, when the bank raises interest rates, it can slow down spending. And as it slows down spending, it will stop inflation. If, by contrast, the Federal Reserve wants to speed up spending and get the economy running, it will lower interest rates. We're in a period of very low interest rates now, and the chairman of the Federal Reserve, his name blanks, I can't remember, he says we are going to have interest rates that will be low for at least another year. And it's very important that they make these statements because, this becomes a boost for people, the manufacturers. They're confident they can make things that there will be buyers for them, et cetera, et cetera. So what Volcker did is inflation was out of control. So he set the interest rates at 20, which is outrageously high. The economy came screeching to a halt and all the inflation dried up. And he says the impact of this is that this sent the message that the government is no longer going to buy its way out of debt by printing money. That is done. He said at that point, this is a quote on page 26, that sent a message that government debt is now in the hands of the market, the free market. If the government wants to get out of debt, they have to look to investors. They don't print money anymore. They have to look to investors. And as I indicated to you last week, every government sells its debt in things that are called bonds. Okay. A bond is an investment. And it turns a country into an investment, right? To be very specific, the bonds in the United States are called treasury bills, or T-bills for short. And they are one of the hottest investment commodities across the world. I had this conversation with you. I was explaining to you that a lot of Chinese consumers and savers, this is a popular investment product. They buy them. It sets up an interesting relationship between the United States and China. It's in China's interest that they buy our debt, because when they buy our debt, when they buy our bonds, that keeps our interest rates low. and Americans will spend money on things that are made in China. You get it? It is in the interest of the Chinese to buy our debt, to put interest rates down, because when they buy it, that sinks the interest rates. And then when interest rates are low for us, we go out to Walmart, load up on stuff. Rachel.
So my Chinese grandmother, she bought savings bonds for both me and my sister, and she continued to like buy them for us every single year, like until they became digital. And
Yeah.
then she just like stopped because she didn't want to figure out how digital worked. But my freshman, and then I think the first semester of sophomore year, I had to sign like like an uncountable amount of savings bonds that ended up paying for my tuition.
Nice.
Like they finally ran out, but yeah, if it weren't for my Chinese grandmother buying those, I don't know where I'd be.
There you go. Well, the saving bond is a different animal. I had them growing up as a kid, and I have to say I plead ignorance because they don't fit into the debt discussion I'm talking about here. So I'm gonna have to do a bit of research on how the savings bonds work. I think I still have one in my drawer. I like bought in 1971 for $50. That's probably worth a mint now. I better go cash that in. But you know, one term that comes up, and this is, some of you guys are pointing out this, there's some complicated language in here. I'm going to zero in on one of them. Okay. One of the not great as in good, but one of the more remarkable things that's happened in the last 40 years, Lazzaratto says, is the securitization of debt. Ooh, I misspelled it. But you know what I meant. The securitization of debt. A security in a financial context, that's just another word for an investment product. Basically, debt became an investment product for some. I've been telling a story about the US debt becoming an investment product for investors all over the world. Why do they want to buy US debt? I was indicating to you, in the interest of the Chinese, they're happy to keep our interest rates low because then we're hungry consumers. Other countries seem to do it. Other investors seem to do it because the United States is a safe investment. The United States pays pitifully low interest on those treasury bills, pitifully low. By the way, Germany pays negative interest. You know what that means?
It means that we pay them to take their debt.
If you're an investor, you're paying Germany to buy their debt. Why the hell would you do that? Because Germany is a very secure investment. Greece comes up in your reading. Very generous. Greece will give you, what do you want? You want 20% on your, buy my bonds, 20%. What do you want? 40%? Why are they being so generous? Not a safe investment. Not. You see how this works? That's at the level of nations. Municipalities also try to sell their debt, like Baltimore City. Poor old Baltimore. I don't know what their bonds are rated. Bonds have ratings. AAA is the best. The US debt has AAA. I think I indicated to you that Micah's is around a triple B plus. I'm not really sure what that means. Baltimore, I'm worried. Baltimore is not very healthy financially, right? It has a shrinking tax base. It has a lot of expenses. They need to sell their debt in order to make the fixes that can attract people back to the city. It's a very delicate balance. And it's a difficult sell. And what he points out, this is around the page 20s, is that governments city governments, state governments, national governments, they now have to look at themselves as investments. So what can Baltimore do to make its debt more appealing to investors, to sell bonds? Baltimore, we got some pipes to fix. We got some roads to fix. How are we going to do that? What do investors want? What do investors want? I'll turn this over to y'all first. What are investors going to look for in Baltimore that's going to make them more appealing as an investment? What does a company do? Starbucks? I don't know what that means.
I mean,
I know what Starbucks is, but I don't know. Why'd you
Yeah.
raise Starbucks?
if you got more Starbucks, then people are spending money at Starbucks. So people must have money to spend.
Okay. Well, they don't have the money to spend first. Let's talk about a corporation again. What does a corporation do when it wants to make its investment, i.e. stock, look good? They want to make that stock rise. What do? And if they can't do a buyback, what else do they do? Because Baltimore ain't doing any buybacks. What's the other alternative, y'all? What is Wall Street downsizing? Nailed it. Baltimore, you want to prove that you're a worthy investment. You need to show me you have your financial house in order. You need to make cuts. You need to make cuts to your schools. You need to make cuts to your libraries. You need to make cuts to your services. Okay? You need to privatize things. Detroit. We know Detroit, right? Poor old Detroit. Detroit is what no city wants to become. Detroit couldn't pay its debts. They went into what's called receivership. They were taken over by the governor of Michigan. Before that played out, they were looking to privatize something. Oh shit, Chris, you just blew my world. I'll get there in a second. Back to Detroit. My narrative was much better. Hey, this is going to hit very close to home to everybody in this class. Hint, hint. What was Detroit going to privatize? They didn't. They almost did. You guys know what they were going to privatize? They were going to sell off their museum. Apparently, they have a very important museum in Detroit because Ford was, the automakers had a lot of money. They bought a lot of classics, and they were going to start to sell off the artworks. So how the hell does Baltimore have a AAA rating? I'll look into that later. That's good, I guess.
I didn't realize how complex all these ratings are, and I think it's only for some of them the more I read it. Like there's all these different subsectors of bonds for different things. And it looks like a lot of them are AAA, but there is a few that look like it has a rating of F1 plus, whatever that means. That sounds bad.
That's probably bad.
But
can you put your whatever site you're looking at, Chris? Would you put it in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
So I told you how the story went at Micah last year. We had, things were crumbling around us. The revenue was drying up like crazy. And the board was worried about what would happen to our credit rating, because then Micah can't borrow money if the credit rating doesn't look good. How did we arrive at a suitable credit rating? the college had to make cuts. People were furloughed, salaries were cut, services were cut. That is what satisfied the bondholders. And that's the story across the board. When governments are at the mercy of finance and financial markets, Lazzaratto says, the logic that plays out are cuts. Cuts to services. Now, I have to think hard about it. In Baltimore City, I can tell you in Baltimore City, the likely cuts have come to our library system. There are a lot of Pratt libraries around town, and many of them have dried up, have closed, branches of Pratt Library, that is, right? After school programs have been cut. The school system in Baltimore City, there were major cuts there as well. I don't know, do we have any MAT students in this class? MAT in the house? Not in the house. Okay. Well, anyway, my kid here in Baltimore, I live in Baltimore County, just outside the city. Maybe some of you guys in public school, this sounds familiar to you. He has class sizes around 30. In Baltimore City, they're talking 40 students to a class. So that's, they clearly, that reflects cuts to the staff, the legions of teachers that they have, right? Here's a quote on page 28, 29, bottom of 28. This is the debt economy. In this way, the debt economy brings with it a kind of capitalism which the savings of workers and of the population in general, pension funds, public health insurance, and social services because administered in a world of competition, would once again become a function of business interests. In 1999, Dennis Kessler estimated at 22.6 trillion francs, or 150% of the state budget. This is in France. The spoils social spending opened up to business. The privatization of social insurance mechanisms, the individualization of social policies, and the drive to make social protections a function of business constitute the foundations of the debt economy. Privatization. Can you guys think of any other areas in which privatization, you've seen privatization, if you understand what we mean by that term? Prisons. Nice. Public service sold off to private interests. I forget, there's two big companies, maybe you guys can tell me, that that are the biggest outfits that run private prisons in the country. They're both traded on the stock market. They're both publicly traded. You can buy stocks in them. They were big donors to the Trump administration. Anybody else, where else you see privatization? Healthcare. Yeah. Obamacare is largely privatized. I'll be happy to get into that next week, but essentially, you know, because I don't have time, 15 minutes, am I kidding? But essentially what Obamacare did is that this is what it did. It mandated that everyone had to buy health insurance from private companies. I'm gonna let that sink for a second. That's what the law did. Next week, I'll explain why. But effectively, it was a gigantic donation to private health insurance companies. It says, we are going to require that every living American buy your product. They didn't opt for socialized medicine. They didn't opt for socialized insurance. They opted to force people to buy private health insurance. So that's an example of privatization. Your parents would tell you this, but about 15 years ago, George W. Bush was thinking of privatizing Social Security retirement. Your Social Security is invested in Treasury bills. It is not invested in the private stock market. But the debate at the time, 15 years ago, was that this is, kind of rickety. This is a risky investment. You're going to put our retirement in the stock market. What if the stock market crashes? So, privatization abounds. And in the United States, in the case of the United States, why are we privatizing things? There's always a variety of reasons. In the case of prisons, you hear the argument, private companies will run this more efficiently, which is bull. But the other argument is government has too much debt. And because it's indebted, US bonds will become a better investment product if they can privatize some things and spin them off. Okay. There's a quote here towards the end of your reading about what Greece had to do. Greece is a very important example sitting in the background of what he's talking about here. In 2008, the country of Greece defaulted on its debts. It had massive debts. It was revealed at the time that the Greek government was not doing a great job collecting taxes. They were letting a lot of people just slide. But one of the biggest investors in Greek debt was Goldman Sachs, a New York bank. Oh my God, my spelling is a disaster. Goldman Sachs, they had bought the debt of Greece. And then the man who worked for Goldman Sachs, who bought their debt, he moves on and he becomes the president of the Central European Bank. And so in 2008, he exerts the power of the Central European Bank to get Greece to pay its debts. Greece had to get itself into shape to make itself a better investment. And what we see as a result is something called austerity. This is another popular term that we need to speak about in terms of a debt economy, austerity. We didn't quite see austerity programs in this country, but in countries that have a debt crisis, they will go into austerity. And Greece's austerity programs are indicated here on page 116 at the bottom. This will also give you an idea of the extremes of privatization. He says at the bottom of the page, Greece in 2010, after having lowered wages, Greece moved back to retirement age. They moved back to retirement age. They froze pensions. They increased the VAT, that's value-added tax that's like a sales tax. They implemented a second economic plan. The latter adding austerity forecast 6 billion euros, blah, blah, blah. Privatizations in electricity, they had to sell off the airport to private investors. They had to sell off their other port for ships, right? That's austerity. And that was exerted by the demands of central banks and the Wall Street banks who were their investors. And what I want you to understand is that we've come to a point where there's something called a revolving door between central banks and Wall Street banks. So the head of the European Central Bank had been an executive at Goldman Sachs. When he puts the screws to a government, whose interest is he thinking of? Is he thinking of the welfare of the Greek people? Or is he thinking of the welfare of the bank to which he's going to go when he's done and make his millions? He's going to think about Goldman Sachs and what they want. In the United States, the head of the Treasury Department, I think for about 10 or 15 years in the early 2000s, was the former head of Goldman Sachs. So the interests of these private financial corporations, they dominate government interests. I'm going to pause for a second because I'm coughing. Anybody want to chime in? Anybody have any questions? All right. Just a few minutes left. I'm gonna hit on this last point here, which is really where it comes to the discussion. This is where it ties into the discussion we were having beforehand about your future and your career and your burdens and how whether you feel burdened or empowered. He tells us on page 30, he says that debt produces a specific morality. And yes, that morality is in terms of the guilt that Teresa mentioned, you know. Beautiful quote on page 30. He says, you are free. This is 31 in the middle. You are free insofar as you assume the way of life compatible with reimbursement. The techniques used to condition individuals to live with debt begin very early on, even before entry on the job market. I'm going to read that sentence again. The techniques used to condition individuals to live with debt very early on, even before entry on the job market. Sound familiar? That's your credit card. That's your college debt staring you in the face, right? Someone quoted in the chat earlier that how every French child is born with 22,000 euros of debt. Where this comes from, Teresa is asking. I mean, I suppose that that's the debt from the social spending of the French government. That's my assumption. They're very generous with their social programs. Since someone brought up Norway, does anybody know why Norway is able to afford all their very generous safety net? Norway has something very special. What is it? Oh, messages. Anybody know what that thing is that Norway has?
Is there a big 50% income tax?
Well, there is a big income tax, but France has very high taxes. And even with the taxes, they're not able to recoup everything. That's why French children are born in debt. Norwegian children are not born in debt because Norway has a very bountiful natural resource.
Geothermal energy?
No.
Fish?
You're close. Now you're far.
Fish oil? No, I'm just kidding.
The second part was right. They have oil. Norway has oil, lots of it. So they're able to pay. They're able to. They live off of the revenue from their oil industry. Let me hit on this last point here before we break. You know, what's interesting is, you know, what else about this morality that's interesting that comes out of the debt economy, he says, is that you all are free. You're free. Do you know what that means? You're free to buy whatever you want. Here's a credit card, right? You're free to buy whatever house you want. Sign of the dotted line, right? You're freer than ever you've ever been before with heavy conditions. Oh, that was the quote on page 31 I wanted. Oh, well, there you go. Because you learned to live with debt early on. But in the next section, he talks about how, you know, how this debt economy is sold to you all is that instead of workers, we're no longer workers. Now we're all entrepreneurs. Yes, you're free to put yourself in as much debt as you can stand. You know what, Olivia? You are an investment. I am an investment. Branton is deciding whether, well, he already decided to go to grad school. Some of you are trying to go to grad school. Will you make the investment in yourself to do that? Because you are going to be selling yourself. That's what you do. Gosh, way back when you all were talking about your future dreams, 20 years now, a couple of you mentioned, I want to work for myself. Perfect. That's what the debt economy wants. They want you to be a lone cowboy, responsible for yourself. Here's a nice quote on page 90. This is bottom of the page. It's about Foucault. Neoliberals no longer conceive Homo economicus as a subject of exchange and market, but as an entrepreneur of the self. You're an entrepreneur of the self. Foucault's description of the neoliberal practices implemented in order to transform the worker into human capital is at once quite enlightening and misleading. The worker, on his own initiative, is supposed to guarantee the formation, growth, accumulation, improvement, and valorization of the self as capital. You are capital. Your skills are capital. What are you doing to make yourself investment worthy? No doubt the worker is no longer considered solely as a mere factor of production. He is no longer, properly speaking, a labor force, but a skill capital, a skill machine. You're a skill machine, which goes hand in hand with a lifestyle, a way of life, an entrepreneurial, ethical position that creates a form of relationship of the individual to himself, time, those around him, the group, and the family. And he goes on to point out in the next page, you are your, neoliberalism, which is this another term for this debt economy. It's this idea, it reduces you. You are your own boss. But when you are your own boss, this means the state washes its hands of your security, right? It kind of sets that up. And I forget where it is. He points out, it's the bottom page 95. He talks about all these self-help books, right? Because you have to help yourself. So now we need self-help books, and we need self-help therapists, and we need coaching, professional coaching. There is a lot on you, right? There's a lot of pressure here, a lot of responsibility built upon us. And these are all the aspects of the debt economy as well. It means to be burdened. It means to be insecure. You're told you're free. You're told your own boss, but at what cost? Any questions at this point? Not a very cheery message. Sorry. I'll have more to say about it next week. Let's go eat. I'm hungry. All right. Have a blessed week, everybody. I'm going to let you go. I will see you next week. You got your papers due. We'll convene at the regular hour. I'll tie up some loose things in Lazzaratto, and then we're going to talk socialized medicine or Obamacare, which you will intimately know very soon when you walk into the workplace and have to get that. All right. Or you'll move to Norway.
Yay.
I don't know about that. All right. Peace, everybody. Have a great week. Okay. I'll stick around if anybody needs to talk to me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
See ya. Hello. Sid?
Yes, hello, sorry.
Hey.
Let me turn my camera on. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So